Good evening and welcome. It's time for another edition of Down to the Wire. And joining me again this week is Capping with Candace. Candace here. And Candace, this week we've got a couple of stakes races from out west, Santa Anita. We've got the Robert Lewis and the Las Virgenes stakes. And we're also going to go off the track. Let's recap last week. We had a couple of stakes races on the trail. One of them was in New York. That was the Withers Stakes. Any thoughts on that race?
I think there's no denying that it was an oddly run race from a pace perspective, but at the same time, I don't think that that's enough of an excuse for Flexibility's poor performance. I know that, people have kind of tried to make excuses for him because he did seem to overrace at times and because the tempo was so slow throughout, but if you're a class horse, you just have to run better than that at this stage, heading to the Derby, and so he would be one who I think you have to take a large negative response towards him following in that race because he didn't show up, and that was really all he had to do. I think had the race been odd tempo wise and he sat there and finished second or finished third, maybe you could make a little bit more of a case for him going forward. But to me, that was just maybe as bad as you could possibly expect for him in that sort of a race. So I'm certainly not on his bandwagon going forward, and to be frank, we'll talk about Mohaymen next after this race, but it does make me question Mohaymen a little bit because I felt like he had pretty much all of his form kind of fall apart to pieces right in front of our eyes that day. But so Flexibility is one that I wouldn't want going forward. Sunny Ridge, of course, won the race. It was nice to see because he had been a little bit of a bridesmaid type going into that, finishing second in the Champagne and then finishing second in the Delta Jackpot. So nice to see him run that well in this sort of a race. I think he did seem a type who, was maybe a little bit more of a later developer. Maybe he's needed a little bit of time and maturity. And who knows, maybe he'll be one of these that stretching out, makes all the difference for him. But if you're a fan of Exaggerator, you have to have liked what you saw from Sunny Ridge going here. And I think it was good to see him put this sort of performance in on a dry track as well, because most of his positive form at that point had come over wet tracks, so to see him do it on dry is another check in the box. So Sunny Ridge, I think he's going to stay up there in New York, so he should have all the chance in the world. I don't think that's a particularly tough division up there, so, nice performance from him, and that's really all you can say.
Yeah, Sunny Ridge, he kind of gutted out the win. I think, Vorticity is just a hard knocker. He'll run his race every time, so I thought he ran his race. Adventus actually had kind of an adventuresome trip. He broke a little slow, and he was wide down the backstretch, and then he actually outgamed Flexibility for third, which doesn't mean much in the big picture, but this was only the horse's second lifetime start, and I thought he did break a little slow, so I think that might have caught, he might have been right there at, I think he could have been closer to the top two more than closer to fourth if he'd had a better trip.
Yeah, especially for his running style too, a horse with speed, it's always a really big deal when they miss the start, even if it's just by a small amount like it was with him.
Anyways, New Jersey connections, and they've hinted that, maybe the Derby isn't their race. Maybe the Preakness of the Belmont point for the Haskell. So he's not necessarily one. And you know what? That wouldn't be that bad of a move. He doesn't seem like a 10 furlong horse to me. And the Preakness a lot of times draws 9, 10 horses. And, maybe you have a fresh horse for the Preakness, you're running the Belmont, and then you go to the New Jersey. So I think Sunny Ridge is definitely a gritty horse and definitely belongs in the top 25 conversation, 15 conversation. Down in Florida, we saw the Holy Bull. And much to our surprise, Perfect Saint did not win.
Oh. No, Mohaymen did what he was supposed to do. It was a little bit of a tough race, I think, for us to analyze because it was just Mohaymen and then everybody else, and that's pretty much how it turned out. When the race was all said and done and run. He's so tough with me because visually, if you just watch all of his races, he does everything you could ever ask about an individual. I think, if anything, he's improved for going 2 turns, and he's very professional. So I can see why the hype is surrounding him. I can see why he's #1 on most Derby lists now at this point after this win. But I think at this point in time, if you're looking at this always from a betting perspective now, talking Derby, he's an underlay. For the simple reason that to me his form is not working out. We saw flexibility, who he'd beaten twice, and not by enormous margins, and he was awful. Um, Greenpoint Crusader got second here. Considering Greenpoint Crusader has beaten Sunny Ridge, maybe that's a little bit something, but again, that was over a wet track. I really, really don't rate Greenpoint Crusader over a dry surface. I said as much in my blog. I think he's a slop track freak, but over a dry surface, I think he's pretty much half the horse that he is over wet. So Mohamed is tough. I think I can't really decide on him until we see him against a better field because I think that strength of opposition for him is severely lacking. But you can only beat what's in front of you, and that's what he's doing. But again, if we're talking Derby, as far as betting goes, now in February, leading to the first Saturday in May, I couldn't have him at the odds that he would be now. No.
Well, I mean, I look at it as he did what he had to do on January 30th. So, I mean, to me, he got an easy race. You can't say he overextended himself.
No.
And if you're a follower of the Tappets, he has exhibited no Tappet tendencies. So,
No.
I mean, so like I say, the Derby wasn't run on Saturday. It was January 30th, and he didn't exert himself, and he made it through the race, and that's what you want. Now, the other horse that's interesting is, and there's been a little bit of a spin on it, and I'm tending to buy it. I think we had another kind of fluky thing similar to last year with Frosted, and I think something was up with Conquest Big E because he did nothing. Now, granted, you could say, well, I didn't like him going into it, but he really didn't run. And now they're saying, the Aero Force was sick and the barn's got a few sick horses. All the horses that day didn't run well at all, so you can kind of buy the theory.
You could, but their thing with him, right, was that they said it was hot, that he was overheated. I mean, maybe he is sick, but I don't think it was particularly actually hot that day. So, you might be onto something saying that there might be some kind of a virus or something going through the barn. That wouldn't surprise me, because like you say, Aeroforce was meant to run the Sam F. Davis, and then they've now since said that he's had a bit of a setback and he won't be there. So, maybe there is some kind of virus going through the barn. If so, it'll be interesting to see how he bounces back. I mean, those are one of those things that even though we're very early in the year, sometimes it takes, any athlete, not even just horses, but any athlete, it takes a lot of time sometimes to really recover from any sort of a virus or illness, and this is just a point in the season where you don't have time.
Well, they move along down the trail. Greenpoint Crusader, one more prep. They're saying the Fairgrounds. Mohaimed's going to the Fountain of Youth. And Conquest Big E, they're saying either Oaklawn or possibly the Gotham. So we'll see where they end up. This week we go to Santa Anita, and we've got the Robert B. Lewis. I think the horses that we expected in here are in here. And I think a lot of people are looking forward to seeing More Spirit make his 3-year-old debut.
Absolutely. You have to think that he's the big name in his field. He really kind of put himself in the conversation with his win in the Los Al Futurity. Taves on Ice hasn't exactly franked that form, but I don't think anybody really expected him to be honest. This is an interesting race, and you get a couple horses coming in from turf races, and some that I think will take money. Justin Ermay is a horse who ran in the Breeders' Cup, took money there, and in his next race took money again. I mean, this is just a horse that always goes off at short prices. I expect him to go off a short price here as well in the Robert Lewis. Maybe not favorite, but perhaps second favorite behind More Spirit. They thought about running him on the dirt at one point earlier this season, and a lot of people were jumping on that because he had ran fourth behind Exaggerator in his maiden special weight. I don't like him on dirt, however, and actually both the turf runners in here, Dresden Ermay and Pathan David, to me have a distinct disadvantage, not just because they always run over turf, but because they're both back markers over turf, and just typically dirt races are run at a faster clip. So if you're a horse who's a hold-up horse over turf, then you might be just completely outrun in the first sectional on dirt. So I tend to, just as a rule, really shy away from horses who are held up in turf races switching over to the dirt, because it's just a running style that typically doesn't work out, especially in these sorts of, still early in the season with these 3-year-olds, and a lot of times these races are kind of loaded with a fair amount of speed. So I'm really against both of the turf runners coming into this spot. The one horse I'm interested in here who might be a little bit of a price is I Will Score. He comes in here for Jerry Hollendorfer, gets Mike Smith aboard. Both of his runs to date, he won and he's taken money in both of them, but I think that you're going to get a little bit of a price with him in here just because More Spirit is a stakes winner. Justin Ermey was second in the Breeders' Cup, and this is a horse who's only ran in a maiden and allowance race, but he has a lot of speed. I think he might just be the speed of the speed in here. He seems a little bit of a progressive type, and while he might ultimately be a sprinter, mile and a 16th I think is up his alley still. I don't think that that's too far. It might be just on that outer cusp of what he wants. Comes in here having fired a couple bullets, so I think I Will Score. This is probably a race that he's really been pointed to and targeted for, and I think he might be able to upset some of the horses who have bigger and better goals down the line.
Let's Meet in Rio. He kind of closed a little bit the last time, but it was a slow race in the Sham. He comes in here along with the favorite, most likely, More Spirit. What did you think of Rio's close the last time? Was that more kind of not as much as it seemed, or did he actually close like a horse that might like longer distances?
I don't think he'll like longer distances. He's by flat out of a storm cat mare, so that's not indicative of a horse you'd think would want to go long. And in races like that where they go so slow, it's almost inevitable that horses from off the pace are going to close because they've been basically walking backwards out the back, so they should make up some ground late, to be fair. So, I mean, and that's not to say you can't get him out on 16th. I think that's fine, but I certainly don't think that he's one who's going to end up ultimately wanting 9 or 10 furlongs.
A couple of horses, and More Spirit's probably going to be 4 to 5. He's been hammered pretty hard the last couple of races. Actually, he's been favored in all 4 of his races. A lot of hype with this horse, mainly because Gary Stevens is talking him up. Baffert definitely knows this is his best Derby horse. He may have 5 contenders, but he really only has 1. And so this is where he's been pointing the horse for. The last race I think was it was a nice race because they lollygagged. They ran him a different style. They learned at Kentucky they didn't want to be near the lead, so then they lollygagged in last. You can do that against toes on ice. You ain't gonna be able to do that against I Will Score. I Will Score will definitely be the second favorite. He will take a ton of money. This is Hollendorfer's horse, and he's gonna go wire to wire. It's that simple. I think he's gonna go wire to wire,
Yep.
and I think anybody can touch him.
Well, that's
now
how
the
I
horse
see
that's
just the speed of the speed.
And now the horse that's interesting is Uncle Lionel because he came in right behind I Will Score the last time. He is a little interesting because that was a fast race, and he lost by a neck at 5 furlongs. He could be the play here. I Will Score is my selection, but I even like Uncle Lionel a little bit more than More Spirit. I think More Spirit may be a little overran. I think there's a lot of hype here, and like I say, that last race looks better on it. Just, you knew he was going to win the race, and that's a lot easier. Like I say, they just lollygagged in last. If they try to show more speed, he won't have that close, and yet if they lay back, there's no way he can beat I Will Score.
No, exactly. I think that he's a little bit up against it just from a pace perspective because I'm not sure he has the speed to go with I Will Score. And as you say, if he just sits down there sitting around in last, he's gonna leave himself with too much to do in this sort of a spot. I agree with you about Uncle Lionel. I think for me this is a race that's calling for just a straight exact. I'd be playing I Will Score over Uncle Lionel. I liked this race last time, and I do think of this group, he might be the one who ultimately wants to go a little bit further, having some of that, having Oatsy and Unbridled up in there as, female influence is pretty close up in his pedigree. And, these Uncle Moles we talked about a little bit last week, but they're ones who, when they first jumped out of the gate flying, I thought, oh, well, these were just super precocious types, but they do seem to be training on kind of similarly to Uncle Mo himself. So I think there is a little bit more to be found with Uncle Lionel. Whether or not he's good enough to reverse the score with I Will Score today, I don't think so. But I think he is probably the most progressive of the horses in this field.
That pretty much covers the field. Path of David, like you said, going to the dirt. Leo Band, still a maiden. He ran a good race in the Sham, but I think this is definitely just, these are better horses here.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Leo Band is he's gonna have his race, and I think it's tough for him because he's just kind of found himself in some really tough spots. But the waters are deeper here, even maybe more so. So I think he might be a horse who we see, running around in some of these races in SoCal in the second half of the season. But I think he needs some time.
That's carded as the fourth race, and then we go to the Las Virgenes Stakes, and it's interesting because that's a Grade 1, and Songbird makes her 2015 debut, 16 debut.
She does, and I mean, she comes in here in a race that you'd have to say everybody certainly expects her to win. And she was the class of the field by a long way since juvenile. Um, I want to see, I think as a fan, you come to a race like this, and I want to see her win as a fan because, you want something to cheer for, and you want, a horse to really be a standout. And as much as Mohayman, as much as he's done on the cold side, I think we've been missing that standout performance and that standout horse. And Songbird, at least on the Philly side, has the potential to do that. So I think as a fan, I certainly want her to go well here. As a gambler, you're maybe thinking that this is the time to get her. This is the time to bet against her because she's coming up for a step off the layoff. Fillies in general tend to be more precocious than their male counterparts, so I do think that there's reason to believe that she might have just been a very precocious filly, and that quickly over time, these other horses are going to catch up to her. I think there's plenty of reason to believe that that's going to happen. And there's also some speed in here. I mean, the presence of a Jade Influence, of a Decked Out, those both bring some speed to the fray. And she's a horse who typically has just taken advantage of being the speed in her races, and I'm not sure that's necessarily going to be the case for her. So while I hope that she goes well as a fan, I think I'm very ready to bet against her as a gambler, so I'm going to take Street Fancy in here. She's won 2 over 3 starts. The only time that she didn't win, she finished third behind Lucky Foley in a race where that track was extremely front-end biased. That was during Del Mar, where there was a lot of wonkety things going with the track there. She jumped out of the gate, bobbled quite a bit, got off slow, and then was forced to then be behind the 8-ball, contend with a track which was favoring speed by a long shot. I think she's the horse who could just lay back that 3-4 lengths, let them go at it up front, and really take advantage. But Street Fancy, I think, is a nice individual. I think that she's one who really seems to thrive over this mile distance, and is one who has the potential to go towards the Kentucky Oaks for Phil D'Amato. He does well over these lengths of layoffs with horses as well. So I like her in this spot, and I think that if somebody's going to upset Songbird, it's probably going to be a horse who's going to be favored by the pace dynamics. So I'm going to go with Street Fancy here. I guess the only note with her is that Mike Smith has always ridden her. Of course, he has Songbird in here, so he's opting to go with Songbird. But again, that's not a jockey booking I don't think I would be reading too much into. I'm sure that he's been committed to Songbird for a while now.
Yeah, I've been watching Songbirds workouts. The one nice thing is when you have a superstar horse like this, they monitor their every move, and you really can see all of the workouts. And like I say, watching those things, I can't see anything to beat Songbird in here. I just think she's the class of the race. I am throwing out the Breeders' Cup Juvenile effort on Landover Sea, so that's who's going to complete the bottom of my exacta. I'm going to go Songbird over Landover Sea, but I just think at a mile distance, they ain't going to beat Songbird. And really, it's just a matter of, I think it's a good, kind of a lot like Mohayman for Songbird. They just want to get out there. They don't want to exert themselves too much. They've already said 2 preps and then the Kentucky Oaks. So I think, that's the plan. I really don't think they're going to try to run in the Derby. I do think, they're thinking longer term, maybe trying the boys in a bigger race this summer and maybe trying to get horse of the year or something like that if everything else goes according to plan. But, again, as we talked about before, you can't handicap the Kentucky Oaks until May 5th. And so, there's still 80 days that Songbird's got to survive everything that's going with down the trail, just like any of these horses. So I do watch these races because, all of a sudden a Songbird is off the trail and you've got to know who's better. Is it Decked Out? Is it Landover Sea? Is it Street Fancy? I mean, So you kind of, even if Songbird goes wire to wire, you still want to watch some of these races just to see if there's any little nugget that you might be able to dig out if she does get hurt along the trail. So I do think it's important to watch these races. So that's the Las Virgenes this week. Now let's take a look at off the track and your topic you want to talk about.
Before I say that, the one note I did want to say for you liking Landover Sea is that when Songbird and Landover Sea last ran in Southern California, they were obviously at set weights 122. Songbird now carries 5 pounds more than Landover Sea. So if you're a fan of Landover Sea, you'd expect her to maybe go closer than that, or at least you'd want to see that. For me and my off the track topic, I wanted to talk about some of these preps and how, we're seeing allowance races with full fields, and then we're seeing, the actual stakes races, derby trail races, maybe aside from Oaklawn, coming up with really small fields. And I'm just wondering if you have a long shot and you just think, well, we're just going to go, guns blazing, throw them in the Florida Derby, see what happens. I think that's one thing. But do you worry that some of these horses who, are either top contenders or mid-range contenders are playing with fire a little bit, just, maybe only running in one prep or two preps that actually count for points?
They could be, just because we saw last year a few times, like a horse like Ocean Knight faltered in, now granted he was facing a couple of good horses in the Tampa Bay Derby. But we saw even Nyquist, now granted he won the race, but he got that 13th post position in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Now he was able to win from there, but we saw a couple of horses that day I think lost because of post position. Cavorting was one of them, and there was a couple of other ones. So I do think some of these guys kind of want to keep that mirage of being on the trail a little bit longer. I mean, if you go get dusted this early on in the trail, it's kind of hard to justify throwing them into the Florida Derby or the Santa Anita Derby. Mm-hmm. So to me, I guess I'd run in the allowance, still call it a prep, and then still throw them in the big race. But like we saw last week with Perfect Saint, like he's ran 6 times, he's lost 4 of those races by 15 lengths. Like, that's a type of horse. I think they're throwing them in these stakes races, and they're I mean, like I don't think people realize Moy Hay Men is 15 to 20 lengths faster than Perfect Saint. Like I just don't think, and I think he'd be 15 to 20 lengths faster than, well, maybe not 15 to 20 lengths faster, but I think he'd be 12 lengths faster than Let's Meet in Rio. I mean, I think people sometimes think these horses are closer in ability than they really are.
Yeah, you and I were talking about this right before we got on air, though, and it's going to be interesting with some of these horses. I mean, we were saying specifically like a Brody's Cause, he's going to be off until March. That's when he'll first resurface, according to McLaughlin. He'll be running at Tampa. I mean, I just wonder if you're cutting it a little bit close. If you have a race or two, if you leave yourself with just a little bit of time and you get a bad draw, now are you left then scrambling, trying to see, okay, we didn't get enough points there, now we got to run in Lexington or what? I just think it could leave you perhaps having to change your plans last minute to get into the Derby if something as simple as the draw goes against you in a big field.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's what's interesting now, because that Lexington's now 2 weeks out or 3 weeks out from the Derby. And I said that last year. I think that's a legitimate prep now. So I think, you could either scratch or, if you want to run, like I mentioned earlier, why not do the Rebel and then the Lexington? Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have to run the Arkansas Derby. It's the same day, and it's an easier race. Maybe you go for the money in the Rebel and then you come back, or you get the Spiral in the Lexington, Sunland Derby in the Lexington. I mean, there's other ways around, and, will points be a factor? It hasn't been the last couple of years. Maybe one of these years it will, but it just seems hard, if you run in the top 3 of the final 6 preps, that's 15 or 16 horses. But you're always going to get 1 or 2 injured, so it just seems like 20 horses or 22 real contenders is kind of hard to get to.
It is, but I wonder if this year it'll be a little bit different, because it does just seem so wide open, unlike the last couple of years where horses, maybe the top 10 have taken so many points between them that it hasn't taken as many points to get in. I wonder if now it's going to be kind of a mush. Like, you might have about 40 horses who all have 10 points or something. But it's going to be interesting, I think, in the years to come to see how this point system evolves, and if people are going to go towards some of these easier targets. I mean, we keep saying Sunland Derby. You run second there, you're in. I mean, even if you took a horse and just conceded that Baffert will send something that beats you, just run second, you're in the Derby. Like, I don't understand why more trainers don't point to races like that. If your goal really is to make the Derby, I mean, instead they're going to races like the Tampa Bay Derby, which is less points and just inherently almost always a more difficult race.
Yeah, although I do think there's something, I think sometimes the fans get more Derby fever than some of these trainers and owners. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes they are the realistic one. Like, I think sometimes it's better off, like, you know what, if you really can't run in the top 3 in the Tampa Bay Derby, see, to me, I'd go to Sunland for the money, not for the points.
Yeah.
That's my theory, is go there for the money. That's why I keep on saying this year, go for the Rebel. It's 100,000 less, and it's 2 minimum contenders less. So
Yes.
would you rather face, a bunch of 80 speed figure horses for a chance at 900,000, or would you rather face 2 90 speed figure horses for a chance at $1 million? That's what I'm saying. I think that's where the dynamic has changed. And the same thing with Sunland. I'd go there for the money and not necessarily for the points. If you run big, we saw last year, Firing Line was at least he was good at the time, and he ran his race in the Derby and he ran his race in the Sunland Derby. He got a fast speed figure and he matched it in Kentucky. So facing, I just don't think, like, to me, the Lexington, the same thing. Like, if you're a good horse, you can go win these off the beat preps and still win the Derby or run a good race. I don't think you have to face 9 good horses in Tampa or Gulfstream or Wood Memorial to say that you're good.
No, exactly. And I think, perhaps that really highlights, though, the importance of black type these days and how much that really weighs into the decisions that are made, especially, maybe with horses not running as many races in their lifetime. I remember last year with Kozan, people had asked if they were going to go Louisiana Derby or Florida Derby. Obviously, didn't end up running in either, but they said right off the bat, like, we wouldn't even consider Louisiana Derby because that's a G2 and we need a G1. So, that's where you're seeing all these big fields, and maybe that's why you're seeing horses running less at this point in the year, because they're sitting there waiting to, make their horse peak in the G1 races. So, I think, seeing less horses in the Sunland Derby or the Lexington or these sorts of races perhaps really highlights, the big necessity for G1 black type in breeding these days.
Well, I think we'll see how it shakes out. Right now, we definitely know there's going to be a 10-horse scrum to 14 in the Risen Star, and there's going to be at least 10 to 14 in the Southwest. So we're going to get some big fields there. I think the Wood, just because it's a New York Grade 1 $1 million, that's always going to get 10, 11 horses. So, and, Santa Anita Derby is a little bit tougher just because, there's just not as many horses out west. You got just the one circuit, basically. And people, why would you ship from Florida to Santa Anita? I think there is a legitimate, we saw, there's horses that have lost off the ship, and shipping early on in April of your 3-year-old year doesn't seem to be what trainers want to do. I'm not, so, we can say all we want, why don't they ship from Florida to Santa Anita? But the fact is they don't.
No, and that's a long ship. You hear about horses who they struggle making van rides between tracks in New York, let alone shipping across the country. So it's probably something, not even just for the sake of the horse, but also when you're talking, this is a business. And you gotta be winning races if you're paying the money to ship all across the country like that.
My off-the-track segment is the fillies. Songbird, I think, is going to bring up a lot of hype this weekend. Last weekend, we saw a couple of fillies, Floridora and Catherine Sophia. Any thoughts on their efforts?
I thought they both ran well. I thought Catherine Sophia in particular ran well with the trip that she got in there. I just think, it all depends on Songbird really at this point, doesn't it? I think, if she comes back this season and as good as she ever was and stays the trip in the Kentucky Oaks, well then it's going to be very difficult to find anybody who's going to be able to compete with her. But then in the same breath, if she's not quite the same or the rest have caught up, well then it makes for a very wide open affair. So I think, the Phillies picture really depends on her at this point, because at least at the end of last year, there was a big gap between her and the rest of the individuals here. And the Phillies is always tough too, because I mean, I don't know if you see this too, but it seems like at this point in the year, the horses who we see dominating are real sprinters. Like, it's different than the boys, where at this time we're starting to see, the horses who really want to go routes, starting to, really exert their, their dominance and rise to the cream of the crop. But the fillies, and it just seems like time and time again, this point in the year, there's some just straight sprinter that has no hope or prayer of staying 9, just rolling, and we see it every year.
Yeah, and I think, there's a couple other fillies that, ran nice in Churchill in the fall. You had Stage Play and Korea Mia. So Korea Mia is starting to get back on the work tab. But Stage Plays ran once and looked like she's going to go to stay at the fairgrounds. And that's been a winning formula for quite a few years now.
It does, and we have fillies running at Oaklawn this weekend in the Martha Washington. I think that's, it's not a group of world beaters, but it's a nifty little group. That's where Nickname ended up showing up. I think she's certainly nice. I mean, she was 4th in the British Cup Juvenile Fillies. I thought that she ran well considering the trip she got there. They didn't make it easy on her there. Was jostled around quite a bit and what was a fairly messy race in behind Songbird, so it'll be interesting to see how she goes, and as long as some of the others. I mean, a horse like Lovable Lynn or Ready to Confess, I mean, they've shown potential. Some of these horses, the fillies, it seems like, too, that some of these ones who, maybe they aren't the best of the best, but you'll see some that, their form seems to be a little bit more inconsistent than the boys, and that, you'll see some who have won a couple races in a row by huge margins, and then all of a sudden one bad race and they're done. And then in the same breath, you'll see some of the fillies that they'll, take them 4 or 5 times to break their maiden, and then once they do, they reel off 3 in a row. So I don't know why that's the case, but it certainly feels like we see that more often with these young fillies, that their form can vary wildly, and that one day a horse might be hot and the next day they're not.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, a lot of the speed figure disciples are saying the fillies are faster than the boys, and that may be the case, but to me, that's like the class level because, it's like XY Jet got a 104 and Green Gato got a 107, and everybody knows that XY Jet would pound, you know what I mean? So, like,
Yeah.
I just don't care if Catherine Sophia got a 112. I just don't think she'd ever beat Mohammed anyways. Like,
Yes.
to me, that's where you handicap So in Songbird, I don't know about, but some of these other fillies, I think they're getting fast speed figures, but I really don't know how good they are. But I think it's kind of the reversal for some of the boys. I think some of these boys are a little bit slower, but I think they're pretty good horses. And at the end of the day, that's, like I say, I think there's 15 to 18 good horses on the male side. We don't know necessarily where they're all going to shake out. Whereas I see Songbird and Stage Play and that, maybe Catherine Sophia, but I really don't, the thing is I've learned Gulfstream, never trust a Parks speed figure, and then I just can't trust a Gulfstream win because we've seen too many of those horses just not show up anywhere else.
No, and again, like you say, some of the fillies getting faster speed figures, I repeat that a lot of times fillies mature faster than the boys. And I think that's one thing we've seen with them is that they're popping off big speed figures, but they're very professional in doing so. I would be very wary of wondering how much improvement any of them really have. Whereas the boys, they might win a race and it's a little sloppy. They didn't do everything right. But most of the top males at this point in time, you can see reason for, inherent reason for improvement in their races going forward. Whereas the fillies, I think a lot of them really have peaked or right near their peak.
Yeah, they just have to hold form for the next 70 days, and
That's
that's
not
all
easy.
tough. Yeah, and that's not easy. So that's where, and like you say, they can run a good race and then bad. And I think the best example of that was Lovely Maria. I mean, she was not right in March of last year. She won the Ashland, she won the Kentucky Oaks, and she was an average horse the rest of the year, and now she's off to Japan. But I mean, she really got hot for 1 month, 2 races, 30 days.
Yeah, and then people were upset that she wasn't in the 3-year-old filly of the year conversation with a few of the others, but you're exactly right that that's what happened. Pretty much she had just a couple hot months in there, and that was it. And then, you know, in the same breath, we saw a couple other fillies that it was like, even before her, came into races, you know, early season preps undefeated or whatnot, and then they would just run up the track. I mean, the one that comes to my mind straight out of the gate was West Coast Belle. I mean, remember how touted she was coming into the early season at Fairgrounds undefeated, and she went from being undefeated to being nobody cares very quickly.
Yeah, and it seems like you say, one a filly throws in a bad race, and like the word is out. Whereas if a boy throws in a bad race, everybody, I mean, they can bounce back from a bad race.
No, it does
I'm
seem
not
that
so
way.
sure Perfect Saint can bounce back, but
He'll be okay. He'll run on the turf somewhere.
yeah, I don't know. I think Roman's got a free box of donuts for entering that horse or something.
Godolphin, Shadwell sent him some donuts. You're welcome.
Yeah, 6-horse field. So they replaced Cherry Wine with Perfect Saint. I don't think that's what Gulfstream Park had in mind when Roman said he was going to enter a horse. But
No.
you know, down the road, you know, actually that Perfect Saint's got some turf breeding, and I think that's ultimately where he's going to end up. And a lot of times we see it doesn't really matter. You know, you can run a few bad races on the dirt, and he'll still be a, you know, once he ever gets to the turf, he'll probably run a
Maybe
couple of
his
big.
dream's not over. Spiral.
Yep, could be Spiral. So interesting week this week. Next week we go to the Sam F. Davis at Tampa Bay. I'm sure we'll talk about quirky surfaces and the whole gang down there. And a couple weeks, you know, then, you know, now we start getting into the every week there's a big prep, and it really started last week with the Holy Bull, and next week Sam F. Davis. Then you come back and you got the Southwest, and then you also got, you know, the Risen Star, and then you go up to the Gotham. So you know, that's where we're going to sort out that middle group of horses.
Yes.
Depending on what happens with More Spirit on Saturday, like I say, I think I Will Score is going to win. And I think he's going to move right into that top 6-7 conversation very quickly if a win on Saturday. And if he doesn't, then basically More Spirit does. And unless he really falters, maybe we get somebody that steps up. Uncle Lino's a little bit interesting just because I think that fast allowance race was that fast, and it could curtail, you know, there's 2 horses that can come out of there.
No, exactly. I mean, there's a lot. I think, you know, that's maybe the intrigue of the Robert B. Lewis is unlike last week where, you know, it was a couple horses who he thought should win. One of them did, one didn't. This week, you know, you really, I think whoever wins that race is really going to be thrust into this conversation of the best horses, and, you know, it'll be interesting to see if it really ends up being More Spirit. I'm with you. I think it's going to be I Will Score.
All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Down to the Wire.